Saturday is no guarantee. Saturday is shifting static, tinnitus time, trapped, Groundhog Day. You stumble unseeing, your surroundings nonsensical. Are you coming or going? Going or coming? Evening cascading into dawn, dawn absorbing afternoon, tomorrow shifts into yesterday, into every day that follows and is left behind.
You know nothing of the world beyond the boundaries of your garden. Everything is new yet undiscovered. Involuntarily consuming a barrage of
social distancing,
becoming semantic satiation, meaningless just a year ago, now the new normal.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I said... It's not the only thing. A different friend texted the group chat to say that her dad was dying. He was speaking in goodbyes and she didn't know what to do or who to call, and fear ruptured in my stomach. But as I watched her cartoon caricature tilt its head in faux thought, there was a barrier against our urgency. There was nothing I could say and there was no hand to hold.
I go for a walk and my mask eats my smile. I watch a woman drop her change and can't get close enough to help her pick it up, and I worry that my body remembers every time I hold it back.
Still, children continue to grow, confined to digital rectangles as their sleeves creep up their arms and their shoes pinch.
There are people I've not seen in a year, whose violent change I will measure by a new haircut, by an absence of light in their eyes. After 1 year on pause, purpose has fallen into the abyss.
You pick up a routine only to drop it the next week. Or a Boris style. When will it end?
Wedding party. The drone's crosshairs fixed on the gathering below. Shapes on a screen. The living dehumanized to abstract clusters. Remoteness triggers remoteness. Flash. The procession fractures. Mother, father, daughter, sister. Brother, son. A newborn gripping his father's finger under the midday sun. Governance by algorithms. No human oversight. Computer precision, remote-controlled shadow wars. No epitaph of final texts. Wedding's widow bride, your hands clasp mine, no more.
I am heard, not seen. Box in the jack. Children are keen. Coin the phrase of what I am to you, what I am to you. What am I to you? Yellow pulse at throbbing crown. Crow flies remotely. Sound unrests. Unyielded by biennial loop. Where wedding's rind leaves a scratch. Lyrical snifters. Miscellaneous whisper. Father's fossils lay ticking in a drawer, an epitaph of final texts. His hands clasp mine no more.
A poet's words are the infantry of language. A regime may silence the body, but the voice will always rise. A regime may lock up a poet in a darkened cell. Take paper and pen. Starve, torture, kill. But the mind, held captive in night's unguarded sleep, will always cry out, freedom. A regime may fire bullets into the soft flesh of peaceful protesters, bloodstains darkening the streets, spreading like night's shadow, in the morning hosed, cleansed, into the sewers of defiance, mixing with mother's tears, flowing to the sea. What use are your poems if you ignore the death of a poet?
Influx AI, leaning OA, preliminary hearings hustle by paper trees, keloid by tabloid, delinquent dexterity, merged with malleable whales. This our scarred constellation. The linchpin, your wife, pours through oxygen's gauze, hanging from boughs of social anxiety. Amened by broken elbow, with no word of rain. Reversal forged, where language drains. Nibbed ineffable, his signature spikes. Old chestnut's disclosure, slanting evening's veneer. Helio daybreaks for tithing, shifting tectonically, page by page, glitched per celluloid convulsion. Renewal spools in essence, emancipation, our unstolen breath.
Otto. My cigarette was cold. Ewald was nice enough. He was quiet, calm, a stiffness that creaked on the photograph. Photographer, hunchbacked like Quasimodo, had my father's brow, dressed like my father, presentable like my father. August. It's getting dark, Ewald said as Sander took our photograph. Head in the clouds, Mother would tell him. The three of us were like that, head in the clouds, feet in the mud, 20. Ewald. It was getting dark. The earth was unpredictable, the air was cold, dry, coarse in my throat. At the hall, I was a boy watching men. They danced the dance I didn't know the steps to yet. I learnt them after the war. I'd just met Otto. August introduced us. He was handsome, well dressed. He was handsome. Otto. Mulfort Hall. Smeared shoes and red cheeks. She shrugged when I told her of the smears, and then we danced, and then I held her. It was the last time I saw her. We were walking to one dance as another formed in distant smog. It was the last time I saw her. August. Good men were hard to come by after Mulfort Hall. Trenches change men. Adolescence was quick in the trench. When I saw my brother on his own, watching as we danced the dance he didn't know the steps to yet, it broke my heart. I should have pulled him up, but I saved him from embarrassment. Ewald. I didn't speak much to Otto. Barricaded utterance. I have always thought he was too far out on the photograph. There is a disconnection between us that saddens me to this day. I should have asked him to come closer. My deepest regret. My deepest regret. Otto. My grandfather died the Saturday before the photograph was taken. He was a chain smoker. I began smoking at his funeral. I didn't like the taste, but an addiction was formed out of grief. My cigarette was cold. August. There was a girl at the dance, Josie. I was killed in the war that March, and she was my last thought. We kissed in the dark corridor beside the dance hall. She ran away, recoiling at the sound of people walking by. I didn't see her after our kiss. I think she went home. If I knew what would happen after the dance of 1914, I wouldn't have cared about Evold's embarrassment. He'd have waltzed with Otto that night. Evold. My father, while ironing, burnt my pocket square. I think that was what I was thinking of as I heard the photograph being taken. My next thought was Otto. A part of me fell in love with him that night. Otto. Evold reminded me too much of August. Same eyes, same lips. I rarely thought of that night after the war. I grew up. Evold. When it was quiet and when gunfire ceased, I would think of the photograph. I would think of Otto. Evold. I wrote a letter to Otto after the war. I told him of August's death. I asked if I could see him, but he never replied. We went our separate ways, lived our own lives, and walked from the frame of the photograph. His cigarette was cold.
Her hands were soft and unworn, and my first thought was, she must be a model. I told her that plimsolls just won't do. You'll stub your toe in those.
Norma Harper headed our Legion of the Women's Forestry Corps at the time. She introduced herself brusquely and commented on my shoes. Welcome to the Sherwood Lumberjills. She couldn't have been more than 40, though crow's feet were well established whenever she squinted. Her hair was the colour of sun-bleached straw.
Catherine was just 25, no children. She was often seen wearing a blouse 2 sizes too large. Told me it was her husband George's. Last worn at their college formal in 1907. Chanel, white cotton, yellowed armpits. She donned George's orange and navy striped tie for luck.
Norma said the tie had to go too. Safety hazard. Could get caught in something.
Catherine cried on her 3rd day. I let her keep the tie, as long as she wasn't working on the axe grinder. Then, the disc scraped her ankle on felled conifer bark. After that, I lent her a pair of jodhpur boots and chaps, which I admitted might be older than herself. Rubber toes, peeling away but sturdy all the same.
No children. A Labrador named Gunther. You're a nosy bugger, aren't you? She'd stand there and supervise us, wiping her brow with a rag often. Sometimes she'd wear a cap.
Sawdust roved in the air, weaved between deciduous trees and ribbons and light. Time paced itself, here in the forest. Trunks lay dormant, donning rings and rings of age. Armies of trees stood proud. They fell on command.
Put your back into it, Kath. I might have complained about Norma's attitude under my breath to Sophie. I mean, all she ever does is bloody stand there and yell at us.
One afternoon, Catherine approached me. The toil of a July afternoon clung to her forehead. Her freckles became one with blots of brown grit, and pale wood chips settled like snowflakes in her mousy ringlets of hair. She got a splinter of wood stuck in her palm. Well, what happened to your gloves? She'd forgotten them. Cap suits you, she told me when I pulled the splinter out. Where'd you get it? My husband's, was all I told her.
She was intimidating, I'd give her that. She was missing something. Wistful, if a little aloof. Saw it in the way she thumbed that worn rag like she'd lost someone.
I couldn't have her looking at me like that. With this job came an air of respect. My authority was my own, passed down from a man in his 60s, granted, but it was mine now. This forest, these timber slats and axes, ours. This war couldn't have pity.
Sophie and I were just wondering.
Tony isn't coming home.
Why women have to care about their looks.
Furious Piers Morgan slams plus-size models and orders obese people. Just lose weight.
Curvy is acceptable, i.e. you must have an hourglass figure with a flat stomach and a peachy bum.
Evolutionary theorists think there could be some connection between emotional intelligence and butt size, because shapely women who have the largest butts and smallest waists appeal to so many men. They needed to develop superior social skills to assess and select potential mates.
What the fuck? Why don't I look like her? Is a Barbie body possible?
You are fat and awful. Triggered, you have shell shock. How long you spend in the trench. You look like overstuffed, privileged, sheltered trash bag. How dare you claim such disorder? You possesses agency. You never experienced trauma your entire life. Biggest worry is having pizza stolen.
Tips. Chew ice or bubble gum when you're hungry. Fast for 18 hours a day and eat for 8 hours if you can't fast the whole day. Hide food in your pockets or in your bra or binder. Cheese has a lot of calories. Avoid it. Wear a lot of layers. You're colder when you're thin.
Dying to be thin. Tara Reid's pals fear for her life as weight drops to 85 pounds. Tara looks emaciated right now and it is very alarming.
Google. How many calories in toothpaste? Is this really what we think is considered like fit and beautiful?
My favourite part of a woman's body is her butt, 22%.
Don't reduce us.
Her chest, 17%.
Don't reduce us.
Her legs, 7%.
Don't reduce us.
Her face and eyes, 15%.
Don't reduce us.
Other, 10%.
Don't reduce us.
The whole package, 29%.
Don't reduce us to our body parts.
Wonderful. Men feel more anxious when dating sexually confident women, says study.
Maybe it's for the best.
The dangerous rise of men who won't date woke women.
Hey, I don't want that anyway.
Bodies as identity. Your body is...
I detoxed my body and I'm still fat.
Lazy.
I love my body and I'm still fat.
Glutinous.
I'm beautiful and I'm still fat.
Stupid.
These things are not mutually exclusive. To the people who look at me, please do not starve yourselves. I did not starve myself. I fed myself greens and water and fruit and protein and sunlight.
Slow.
You don't have to do that to be beautiful or healthy. That was my way. You can do life your way. Remember, despite anything anyone says or does, do what you want with your body.
Women are their own worst enemies. Women were made to please men.
Top definition. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't give a fuck about you.
Must
Don't
be taller
be too
than
fat.
your partner. Or
Don't
are you
be too
really a
thin.
man?
Look
Always
natural.
be strong. You
Don't
need to
be
man up.
vain. Put
Unhealthy
some effort
bottling
in.
of emotions is
Don't
what's
let me
taught
know you're
and the code you
trying.
live by.
Look the way I tell you to look.
Must
Know
be
what
strong.
you're talking about.
Arms
Don't
thicker
be
than your
smarter
neck.
than me.
benching
Be
on sugar
ambitious.
devilish
Don't
body
earn
with a
more
boy's
than me.
smile. Because
Make
then
me
you're
feel like
something
a
less.
man.
What it's impossible
Don't
to be.
let me hear
and still
you're
be.
struggling.
There
There is
is
no strength until we're both lifted up. Put
Want
out.
it.
No one
Even if you
wants
don't.
a broken lock.
Chase
Show a
it,
little skin. Don't
as it
dress like a
plays
slut.
hard to get.
Give me something to look at.
Dare get attached.
Adorn
until
yourself with
the
what
Lord
makes me feel
already
good.
in.
Take away the stigma, and the joy will return. Don't
Your
be
face
emotional.
is red. You
Take care of me
always
when I'm
shout,
upset.
even
Don't
when
annoy
no
me.
one else speaks.
Be there
If
when
words
I
don't
want
work,
you around.
fists will.
Don't expect me
Why
to be there.
shouldn't you?
Love yourself
Use what
less
you've
than
been
you love
given.
me.
Speak
less. Say more. Be
Hold the
silent.
door.
Tell
So
me you love me.
Tired.
Don't
Must
be
never
vain.
talk.
Go
Give
to
up
your knees
your
for
seat.
me.
Even
Don't
if you
dare
can
to
barely
stand.
I
can't stand this.
I don't know much of what came before me. I don't know anything that's happened near me. But I am here. Tangled and bruised, beaten and bent. I am in the moment and living. If this moment passes, I will pass too. Enter me in the competition and watch me win first prize. Pour me coffee and interview me for my life story. Word for word, hear my blood. Spit travels and carries the message. Blankets cover my eyes and boil my blood slowly. Ask me to be your pet, your house guest, your project, and I'll say yes to hide the bruises.
Piping hot cups in hand, Charlie slipped into his seat and handed the girl opposite him her tea.
Thanks.
No problem. They were quiet for a moment as they both sipped their drinks. He looked at her again, tattered clothes and damp hair, a picture of misery on the streets. I'm really sorry about running into you like that.
Don't be. I didn't see you either.
Her voice was soft, almost a whisper.
It's Sam, by the way.
She gave him a crooked smile, and he found himself smiling too. It's nice to meet you, Sam. I'm Charlie. Suddenly, Charlie had an idea. Sam. He spoke slowly, trying to figure out the best way to ask. My roommate has just walked out on me, so I have a sudden spare room in my apartment. The smile faded from her face, replaced by a slight frown.
You don't even know me.
That's true.
But you're offering me a room.
Also true.
You know I wouldn't be able to pay rent.
I assumed as much.
So why?
Charlie took a sip of his coffee and met her eyes. Well, I'm going to be paying a rent for both rooms anyway. I'd much rather you get to use that room than have it stay empty and let you go back to the streets.
I don't know what to say.
How about okay? She looked at him, a smile breaking through the frown on her face.
Okay. Underneath the covers, before the sunrise hits, without the windows open, my body is radiant. Layers peel and reveal serotonin after each pull of the strands. Like a loose piece of cheese hanging onto its stick, each pull reveals a new piece. Want to be touched and moulded into whatever you need me to be. Spines crack and moan as pages fall into my mind. Words comfort, holding me in embrace. Unknown. Watch you observe, perform your obligo, obsess. Welcome to the home of dreams. Don't forget to follow the breadcrumbs home, or you'll miss the sweet relief of imprisonment.
Charlie couldn't help but smile. Watching Sam settle into the spare room in his apartment was like watching a child on Christmas Day. She had taken to wandering around the apartment, touching seemingly normal things with a look of quiet joy on her face. She stopped, at last, in front of Charlie's tiny bookshelf. With a tentative hand, Sam reached out and ran one finger down the spine of the hobbit before shooting him an apprehensive look. Charlie laughed and waved a hand towards the books. You can read whatever you want. I'd love for them to get more use. The biggest smile broke across her face, and he could have sworn he saw her eyes gleam with tears as she turned back towards the bookshelf. Carefully, she slid the Hobbit away from its fellows and brought it to her chest for a moment.
Thank you, Charlie.
Her voice shook with emotion, and Charlie found his own catching in his throat. It's really okay, Sam. I'm glad you like it here. He watched, transfixed, as she happily settled herself on a tiny corner of the sofa and disappeared into the novel.
What is a home if not a vessel for love? Is it a snow globe of happiness? A glass house where we can heat our relationships until they are grown? Don't throw stones. Let the mind open up and me fall out. If I tumble too fast down the stairs, catch me and hold me tight. I won't believe you are there until I can feel it. But when you are, when your fingers puncture my skin, I'll know you are here. Cut open my skin and blow your words in. Build up my skeleton with thoughts and prayers, and watch as I recoil. I'm ready to feel hidden, but under you I feel seen.
Charlie rolled the pill between his fingers. It was small, maybe a couple of millimeters across, and chalky white. Amphetamine. The first time he'd seen Harry in weeks, and he brought these along with him? Oh, come on, Charlie. Harry had already taken a pill like the one in Charlie's hand. You really need to let loose, man. I don't know, man. Charlie looked at his friend. Harry had an anxious energy about him now, a buzzing need for movement. He rolled on the balls of his feet, tapped his hand on every surface near him, and kept up an almost constant chatter. Really, dude, come on. When is the last time you've had fun? Well, go on. It's not every night we get together. Have a little fun with me. Charlie looked at the pill again. Okay, man, but just this once.
I want your fingertips on mine. Each strand of DNA together. I want to connect. I don't want us to be apart. Let the duvet shield us from the rain above. We are free here. We are distant here. Chalk scrapes against the blackboard of your brain whilst nails trace across my back. It seems we were meant for this. Let your eyes wander and pupils become holes in the wall. Dare to look through, please. If I say the words, if I really mean them, will you laugh? Or will you scratch them onto the board? Screams show your love and I'll watch, waiting for the next high.
The electric buzz burned through his veins, pulsing pleasure sending shuddering waves of ecstasy throughout his body. A distant clattering brought him back to the here and now, a loud clunk and the jangle of keys.
Charlie?
Sam's voice echoed through the apartment. Surprise and joy filled him, mixed with something muffled and distant. Sam! He somehow mumbled while shouting. She wasn't supposed to get back from work for hours. What a wonderful surprise. Pushing himself shakily to his feet, he stumbled from the room, pulling away from the clawing fears that stuck to his feet.
Charlie, are you all right?
Concern entered her voice as she heard the stumbling commotion of his approach. I'm amazing, Sam. I'm so happy you're here. She laughed as he wrapped his arms around her, spinning her around, a tinkling sound so singularly perfect that he found himself laughing too. He put her down gently and laid his hands on her shoulders, staring into her eyes. I love you, Sam. She gasped slightly, a sudden breath sticking in her throat. Then she smiled, her face erupting into caverns of joy as her eyes gleamed in the dim light.
I love you too.
She kissed him then, hard and sweet, the smell of her perfume wrapping around him.
Flower sits in vase, while petals fall around it, holding on to its last breath, like summer leaves clutching for their survival. No one knew where the darkness would fester, or even if it would arrive at all. But as they say, when waiting for a bus, they all come at once. It must have started in the roots, in the bottom, where nobody would have looked. The petals grew as though they were natural, but it's hard to spot the poison when injected directly into the vein. Plants don't have kidneys. They can't stop the noise until it's at the eardrum. They can't stop a petal falling until it's too late. Glue it back on if you must. Push the petals back together using warm hands, but what is broken is lost. Are you a tulip, dear? Or a rose? Can you survive the harsh winters, or will you wilt? Are the pine needles above too sharp for you to bear? Will you look through them, or are you blind? You can't see the wood from the trees, so lie with me, flower. Watch the world move around. Me, you, petals. We all fall together.
The whiskey burned Charlie's throat, the chalky taste of pills filling his mouth. Liquid courage to mix with his drops of bliss. He drank alone, slumped over the sofa. His mood as black as the shadows of the apartment. He could see that look as if it were burned into his mind. It tainted the bliss, darkened the joy. The bitter taste of resentment clung to his tongue. How could she? The door clicked as it opened. Sam was always so quiet when she came home. If it wasn't for that click, he might never have noticed. Turning around, he saw her pause, staring at him. So high and mighty.
Charlie?
Her voice was uncertain, confused, but her eyes. There was the look again, waiting for him. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying, and walked towards her.
Charlie, what's going on? Are you...
She broke off as he closed the distance between them, the look hardening in her eyes.
Are you high again?
The question was quiet, disappointed. How dare she? What if I am? He spat, slurring in his rage. A tear formed in her traitorous eyes, her lips trembling.
Please, Charlie, this isn't you.
His fist slammed into her face, hard. She didn't scream when she went down. Not this time. She landed on her back, eyes bright and frightened. The look was gone. Whimpering, she began to crawl away, a dark bruise already forming on her cheek. He took a step forward and grabbed her ankle. She kicked at him, but he pulled her back and hit her again. And again. Charlie's mouth was dry. His breath scraped like razors through his throat, and his mind was cloudy. He was lying on something rough. His back was hot, and his hands hurt. Opening his eyes, he saw that he was lying on the carpet of the living room, the sun filtering through the windows behind him, heating up his back. Stumbling to his feet, he made his way unsteadily to the kitchen. That was when he heard it, a quiet sobbing, the kind of crying that you just can't stop. Rushing into the kitchen, he saw Sam, curled up in the corner. She was shaking, crying like he had never heard before. Sam? He spoke quietly, hoping beyond hope that she was okay. She stiffened at the sound of it, her entire body becoming rigid. Charlie's heart hammered in his chest as she turned to look at him, tears still running down her cheeks. Her face was a mess of blood, bruises, and tears. It was as if someone had jammed a knife into his chest, the way she looked at him. He reached a hand out towards her, and she flinched, trying to pull away despite the wall behind her. Sam, what? He trailed off, noticing his hands. The knuckles were split and torn, coated in blood. He stared, a terrible realization tearing through him. Sam? Slowly, she nodded, a terrible whimpering sound escaping her. Charlie felt his heart break as she began to sob again.
Marks on the arm don't disappear in water. You can't scrub away the lines, teeth, cuts. Duvet covers won't protect from the daggers that aim for your chest, even if you keep yourself hidden. Water and soap, that's all it needs. Water and soap until you scrub the carpet clean. Hide away the footprints and palm prints. They'll disappear if you scrub hard enough. Conceal foundation powder and it's gone. nor memory, nor evidence, just flinches at the sound of a cough.